Hey, this is Alicia Deva, author of Before War. I'm making this video in Thailand, so forgive the low quality sound and the crashing of the waves. So, I want to talk about the biggest transformation of human life, the most important thing that ever happened to our species, something that almost nobody knows about and very few people talk about. It's been covered up in taboo several times throughout history as it's been discovered, and because of politics, because cultures have a tendency to preserve themselves by suppressing the information that goes counter to them. But finally, some people are talking about it. The well known geneticist David Reich is talking about this a lot, and he is saying that this is the most important transformation of human life ever, even more so than the invention of agriculture. Because actually, in reality, agriculture wasn't that big of a deal to the average person living in their lifestyle. A lot of cultures went back and forth between hunter and gathering and decided to abandon agriculture because it wasn't good for your teeth, and it took thousands of years to take hold, and it wasn't that big of a deal. Now, what happened around 5,000 years ago is that a primitive group of nomads, pastoralists, shepherds basically, took over the world and changed the world culture forever. They did this by domesticating the horse, and that's how they were able to spread their culture far and wide. Before this, the much more advanced cultures, you might even dare call them civilizations, whatever that means to you, a huge trading network that stretched across Europe and Middle East, Mesopotamia, even into what's now Pakistan, India. This trading network or civilization was known as Old Europe, was peaceful. There was only sporadic episodes of violence, very little. They were egalitarian. There were no status hierarchies. There weren't some people buried with a bunch of shit and other people living in hovels. There was no male dominance. In fact, the culture seemed to be obsessed with the feminine. All of the pretty much 99.9% of the thousands of artifacts that were found were of the female shape, very sexualized. And these weren't porn dolls, they were found in temples. And the roots of this culture go back hundreds of thousands of years into the Paleolithic. So this was a extremely stable, long-lived culture that revolved around the mother goddess, and where sex was sacred and sexuality, female sexuality was sacred, male sexuality was sacred. So the horse nomads changed into something completely different, apparently from an extreme desertification event, a very sudden climate change event where a whole area turned to desert very rapidly, and the people that were adjacent to this desert underwent a trauma response of becoming violent, not just random acts of violence, but violence being a huge part of society, like a core part of society with a permanent warrior class and constantly waging wars and raiding against their neighbors. And with status hierarchies where some people are chiefs and other people are peons, and male dominance where men totally ruled over women and women had no access to resources except through their sexual services to men, basically became servants to men. And where the lineage went from being passed from mother to daughter to being passed from father to son. And so for the first time, fatherhood was recognized. Before that, there's no word for father in the most ancient languages, and people knew who their mothers were, and they belonged to their mother's clan. And the mother's brother helped raise his sister's kids. He was the uncle, and this pattern was in the oldest cultures in continents all over the world. It was a very ancient, widespread, and very stable pattern because the clan home had a network of people to take care of the kids, and wasn't dependent on a fragile sexual bond between a man and a woman. So these people invented weaving, building, agriculture. These were the first farmers. They invented agriculture. They invented ceramics and metallurgy. They made copper artifacts and gold. So when things started to dry up even more up on the Russian steppes on what is now Ukraine, where the horse nomads were, they must have figured that these people down in the valleys with all of their stuff were easy pickings because they had no warriors and they lived in indefensible locations because they had never conceived of war. So starting around 3500 BC was the first colonization, rape, attack, genocide. The horse nomads basically killed off all the men of the indigenous Mediterranean people that had created civilization in Western Eurasia. Either they killed all the men or they prevented them from passing on their genes. Either way, the genetics don't lie. The male genome went from like 30 different lineages to 2 in a very short period of time. So all of us are descended from this original hybrid between the steppe nomads, who became the Indo-Europeans and the Semites, and the indigenous Mediterranean women. So pretty much all of us are descended from those two groups on our father's side, and the Mediterranean people on our mother's side. All of us who are European, Middle Eastern, Western Eurasian. In Northern Europe, you find more of the Indo-European blood, and as you go south, you find more of the original Mediterranean blood. And of course, those Indo-European languages would end up being spoken by at least half or more than half of the world today, as they impose their languages on the people that they conquered. And it took millennia for the ancient religion of the goddess to be wiped out. She was still important for thousands of years, and women had the power as magicians, seers, priestesses. Like throughout the entire Paleolithic hunter-gatherer times, women were always the priestesses, and this is why women were so important, is that they were seen as the keepers of the magic, and magic was everything. And so when we shifted to the male paradigm, where war was glorious, sex had to become shameful, because in order to know who your father was, you had to suppress women's sexuality in order to make sure you knew who the father was, which previously it was polyamorous and potentially even orgiastic, but now sex became sinful and violence became somehow glorious, and oppressive rulerships and competition over cooperation, and it's basically been a long stretch of shit show ever since. So I write all about this in my book Before War. You can read all the evidence for that. And now I'm working on the fictional version, Before God, The Greatest Story Never Told, which is, fictional version of the coming of the horsemen to this peaceful orgiastic culture. There's been only 2 people that I know of, novelists, who have tried to tell this story, and I've looked, and they're both incredible. One is Judith Tarr, the White Mare's daughter, and one is Mary Mackey, The Day the Horses Came. So the story does exist out there, but I think it is the most important story ever told. It explains everything about our ancestry, about our languages, and how we've gotten to ourselves on the brink of nuclear war. So check out Before War and look for Before God one of these days. And thanks for listening. Like and subscribe.